as you gain experience, you start seeing a lot of patterns, and you also see a lot of things that haven't worked. When things work, you're starting to see now patterns out of things that are working. So your wealth or your USP is that you have this bank, a data bank, whether it's intuitive or real frameworks. You have intuition plus a framework or set of frameworks.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Off to the Valley, a podcast that brings to light the incredible stories of those who left the familiarity of home for new horizons. I'm your host, Pratik Panda, always curious and eager to share these journeys of courage and determination. Today, we are excited to have Kausambi Manjita with us, a true embodiment of the spirit this podcast celebrates. Kausambi, fondly known as Kaus, has an extraordinary tale of stepping out of her comfort zone, embracing the challenges and opportunities that come with it, and has landed herself in new lands. Kausambi's journey from India to Canada is not just a geographical shift, but a testament to her entrepreneurial spirit. As the co founder of Mason, she's redefining the e commerce landscape, simplifying technology for small retailers globally. Now, while we will touch upon some of her professional milestones today, our major focus is to bring out some of the human story behind these achievements. Cos, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Let's dive into your inspiring journey. First things first, tell us a little bit about your background and how did you decide to move from India to Canada?
First of all, thank you so much, Pratik, for having me here. And it's a small world. We spoke a while back, and here we are on a podcast you are hosting. So exciting and so serendipitous to actually meet you again. Honestly speaking, for me, a lot of things have been planned, like the decision to be an entrepreneur, to jump out and do something of my own, no matter what, was a very planned decision. But if you ask me, has the decision to move or be in a certain region and all of that has been driven by what opportunities arise based on the number one decision, which is I want to be an entrepreneur and build my own successful business. The first thing that we built did not work out. We were very specific to a geo. We were not experimenting enough. So I think the second time around when we started Mason, bang in the middle of the pandemic, I think it was very clear in my head, and of course, our team and our early team and co-founder and our founding team is that we'll do whatever it takes. Like we'll figure it out. But we will not say no to opportunities because you never know where the roads lead to. And we started out in retail. This time around, that is the specific industry we help out. And because of that, I think East Coast in the US becomes standard go-to answer. If you are selling to brands and retailers, you got to have some presence in the East Coast, and New York is where a lot of partners and brands are. But again, looking at the cost structure of being in New York versus being in Toronto, I think the decision was that, hey, like Toronto's not just easy from a perspective of the cost, but it also has a lot of Shopify talent. So does this sound like a good location, right? So again, like to cut a long winding answer short, depending on the opportunity, it's just worked out this way that we are right now straddling a couple of geographies and hopefully in future more.
Okay. And when you made that decision, right, and you mentioned a little bit about the Shopify talent, and that's an interesting insight to have. Do you think that's what other founders should also keep in mind when they decide where their startup should be based? A lot of them think about the US as the very
Yeah,
first option, right? Because that's typically for most startups, at least coming
yeah.
out of India or even other geographies, the US is the market they're trying to sell. Does
Yeah.
it make sense then to be in the US, or does Canada offer something different for you? Why did you not move to the US?
I think for a first time or a repeat founder, again, the question sort of the answer would shift. Typically, you would hear a lot of first time founders, the standard answer, and we did that with our previous startup, right? Was that, hey, like West Coast, being in the valley is where it's at, off
Yeah.
to the valley, rather, literally. And we did. I was traveling very often and spending a lot of my time in the Bay Area, everything from San Francisco down the Bay, every on till I don't know, Sunnyvale and so on. So that is what we were doing. And it's not that there are no opportunities in selling to retail in that region. There are. But I think as a first time entrepreneur, that's what you imagine, that if you're selling to US, everything is happening in the valley. But as you, I guess, mature as a founder, you start realizing that life's very short. So you want to maximize on the opportunities to ensure that get the best out of that time. That's a very big learning for me, is do what it takes to make things work, but also pick the path that promises to be, even though more difficult choice possibly, a bit shorter and faster route to failure or success. And I say
Got it.
both, either, right? It need not be only success, but even if you fail, you got to fail quickly rather than like long run. So I think the region depends. I see a lot more second, third, whatever, successful, or folks who didn't make it and then made it work the second time or the third time around actually take decisions which are agnostic of the which region to be. Is it? It's just US has the most money and the standard answers, but I think they have actually taken a path where they have got the quickest wins or losses. Yellow in the early days went to Southeast Asia, Indonesia. That's where they started. That's what Nagu talks about. And then you hear teams who actually, you'd be surprised, Charge B is actually in Amsterdam. They're not in the valley, right? So go where you need to be. And I guess for us, that was what the learning was. And we made it this time.
Great. And do you think Toronto gives you some kind of a cost advantage and did you estimate that upfront, or is that just a sort of secondary benefit that happened to come your way?
No, it was definitely for us for sure. Because again, as I said, retail, New York is a big hub, and a lot of folks are in New York. But if you want to live in New York versus to fly into New York once, twice a month, or three times a month, it's $100 back and forth if you book on a good day, and
Yep.
it's a 1.5 hours flight, and you can literally do two, three, four, five, whatever stacked meetings over 2, 3 days and head back, right? And that is works out much more budget first than it would if you are just sitting in Manhattan and waiting for meetings to happen. Of course, like New York, Bangalore to New York doesn't make sense. Or Toronto to New York, of course, wasn't is like a no brainer. I think similarly, if someone has the ability to be around New York, but not necessarily, doesn't have to be Toronto, but if you are like, hey, it just makes sense for me to be here, and then I can fly into whichever region. I can be somewhere, I can fly into LA if my clients are in LA, and I can just quickly go there at $150 and then make meetings work. I think you should take that decision.
Yeah. And I know a lot of founders who moved to Vancouver for the same reason.
Yeah.
It was relatively more stable for their personal lives and a
Mm,
better ecosystem that way. And you could pretty much very easily drive down to Seattle or fly to San
mm.
Francisco and be there in a $250 round trip flight, right? And the cost of it's hard to put a price to the sort of convenience as well as the stability that you can find. Switching gears a little bit, tell us a little bit about Mason first, your current startup, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the team.
So, what we do at Mason, we are an AI solutions provider for commerce. So, we work with retailers and brands to help them leverage the advantage of AI and get more sales. That's end of the day. That's what retail is all about. Can I make more sales happen? Today, we help with their online store presence. We are soon branching out to connecting offline and online too. But we help them run AI powered sales and promotions, essentially take decisions. On one side of it is taking decisions on what kind of products to run at what kind of price and for what kind of consumers segments. It can be the segment of one, and on which channel, right? So that's essentially what we help brands do. We help them get more sales with AI. And some of the names you must have heard: Skechers in Thailand. We have in India, Mukobara starting to use this
Nice.
fairly loved brand, now getting out to be in India. We have Myntra and Swiggy as some of our older, larger enterprise customers. We have young teams, even unusual companies, brands like Amar Chitra Katha. I'm taking Indian names
Wow.
because I assume that a lot of our audience will at least start out from India. So these are some of the names I'm sure a lot of us would have heard originating from India.
That's awesome. Now tell us a little bit about your team and how it's structured between Canada and India.
I think globally, this is how we think about it, and then keeping it region agnostic as of now, is that we have our engineering and technology and product hub in India, and we have our inside sales hub in India, right? So these are, and because of that, we also have our customer success, at least the early support and success in India, right? So this is the hub. And then each region has their own specific nuance of marketing and own specific nuance of the kind of partnerships that we can strike, own specific nuance of field. So, that is how we will, take a look at each region, and depending on where the need is, set up the appropriate go-to-market teams in that region, right? Always centralizing these functions back in India. And that's how even North America is, not necessarily thinking US versus Canada, but most Canadian brands sell to US. How we are structured is that North America, of course, has its own marketing and go to market, I would say, presence. And then similarly for GCC that we are starting off now, we are starting with the same approach and of keeping our technology and R&D currently in India and our inside sales and anybody who supports inside sales in India.
Got it. Did you have any kind of initial connections or support system in Canada already?
For me personally, yes. Family is based out of Canada. So in fact, my sister and her partner, and they're all Canadian citizens. So it, of course, definitely was a big, easy. I didn't even have to spend on that rent.
That's a good thing.
And at home, like every single day, which is very important for me.
I had to put a price on that. Okay. So if somebody is new, then they might be starting a company in India, or I've met a bunch of founders from Singapore, Malaysia, who are all trying to sell to the US market and finding ways either to move to the US or to Canada. If they don't really have the initial connections, do you have any sort of tips or advice on how they can go explore those markets, make a
Mm.
decision on where to?
Yeah. Interestingly, just over the last couple of days, I noticed this young founder. Again, I wouldn't know whether he wants his name to be mentioned, so I'll stay off it. Who basically started out in India, not necessarily from any of your IITIM brands, but he's actually customers, early big names in India, got early big names in Dubai, and now getting not big, but definitely mid market names in US. And I think he's a great example of a team of three really going one customer at a time to get your first 20, 25 deals, right? They're smaller ticket deals, but he's getting that proof of concept that he like people want this product and people are gonna want to pay for this product. So I think and he has no, as I said, he's not tapping into an IIT network. He's not tapping into a Wharton network. He's not doing any of that, right? And nor is he heavily funded. He's still bootstrapped. It's, as I said, very early. He's just 0 to 1, proving the proof of getting the proof of concept in place and getting those first 25 customers to pay. And he's just doing cold outbound. I think he's just pinging people on LinkedIn and doing whatever it takes. One person leads to another, and he's doing a great job. You have to see his emails and his outreach methodology. I think he's really nailing it
Right.
one by one thing at a time. So the reason I'm giving this example is that, again, it really, and this answer, people don't like it because it's not here's a playbook, use it. It's not. It really depends on your personality type. He's the kind of person who cold outbound works. People are responding to him. I've seen, for me, cold outbound has always worked. They have pinged people and they have just responded back. Not a gender thing, looks like, because I get response, he gets response. Okay, guy. But there are people who will say that no, actually for us, partnerships worked on day one. I got a partner. Some people will say, no, I flew in and I just stayed put I've had people give me that advice. Fly in, stay put for, I don't know, 3 months, and then you'll figure out your first deals, right? Other people are like, go to events. Really depends. I think one, on your personality and what works for you, what you can leverage the most. But second, also in your sector. How do people make buying decisions in your sector?
Yep.
That is a very important question.
That makes sense. One of the things I want to touch about is a little bit of your human or personal side to this journey, right? I've been shuttling back and forth between North America and India for almost 6 years now. And pre COVID, I still had my entire team based in India, whereas I was in the US.
Yeah.
And we really didn't build a team for remote work, right? Back then. Now, I think times have changed. People have gotten adjusted how to work remotely and so on. But pre COVID, that was not really the case, right? So I would travel 4 to 5 times in a year. And at some point, it used to get very tiring, not just physically, but mentally. And I would notice these patterns where my brain would just shut for 2, 3 days and I would take a break, shut down my laptop and my phone. I lived in California back then, and it was easy to go find a place to camp or just be in nature, recharge myself, and then come back. Now, you've been also going back and forth between Canada and India a lot. Do you see any sort of challenges? Maybe it could be physically, but it could be also mentally, that you have to face as a founder as you're trying to shuttle and keep both of your teams happy, keep the market happy, and so on.
This year, I traveled to Canada. I went back and forth between Canada and Bangalore twice, and between Singapore and Bangalore three times. Yeah. Yeah. And in between, there were a few trips here and there. So it can get, I feel like it is just, I'm making up for what I could not do probably during COVID, but it just was required this year, right? It might not be required every year, but it was what required this year. That's where I feel like a routine really has helped, and I did not ever have it before. But I think now I'm just starting personally. Actually, for me, my dad had a mini stroke early this year, and that sort of made me pause. And he's much better now. Thank you so much. But I think that made me pause and question. He on the face of it, he has everything going for him. He's been a very healthy person, and you realize that as you grow older, there are things that sometimes are not in your control. So it can happen for multiple reasons, and you don't really like. How do you start thinking about your health? Very important, your mental health, I think, from early on. And my dad is just figuring out how to be old. So for him, I think a lot of what we realize is that, like, he was, for someone who's been very busy and very active and very self-sufficient, even beyond retirement, he's been just on his own. Suddenly you are not the same. You can't walk at the same speed. You can't eat all the same food. Your friends are dying out. That was getting to him. That's what we realized eventually. So as you rightly said, like mental health, like that is so important. But a lot of it starts with the input, mental health. How do you just wake up one day and say that now I'm going to take care of my mental health? Meditation, eating right, exercising. I think all of those we all know, but how do you make it a habit and how do you make it a routine? And keeping things flexible, where I think the flip side of it is also, one, can I keep a routine? But two, if I miss a routine, then it doesn't mean that I'm starting from zero. It's just a blip, right? And for me, that has been another learning and struggle this year is it's okay. 1 week, and as you can see, long stints of 5 very long, prolonged trips for work and in a different region, in different weather conditions, in sitting in an Airbnb and trying to figure out people to meet too, not necessarily having everybody around you all the time, being alone, I would say, in a region. Like for me, for Singapore was like that. So I think it really, two things have helped. One is routine, like some that every day I need to do walk, X steps, whatever helps me, meditate, eat certain, avoid or be aware of what portions you're eating, or eating more balanced food, ensuring that you're doing your medical test when you are coming back home. I've been cautious about it this year. But I think the second is also not beating yourself too hard and realizing that when you jump off the bandwagon, it's okay. It's just, I just need to restart from tomorrow, right? It doesn't mean that everything's gone back to zero. Easier said than done for a lot of people, right? For a lot of us. And I've struggled with it all my life. I think now I'm starting to realize that daily commitments, almost reminders for me, when I put things on my calendar, it really works. And that's just my trick. I've started putting everything on my calendar, like
Yep.
15 minutes, 30 minute slots, and it works for me. I think figure out what that is for you, and yeah, WhatsApp and calls, and constantly being in touch with people who love you and who love really.
I think one thing that you mentioned, I want to talk a little bit more about, which
Yeah.
was around not beating yourself to it a lot, right? Sometimes it's okay to not push yourself too hard. I've been a 3-time founder. I've always been this person who would hustle, and even as an operator, that just is in my blood, I would say. And I know that most founders also just are in that hustle culture, right? And sometimes it's too late, and then your body tells you or your mind tells you that it's time to take a break. And by the time, it's more often than not too late, right? As in, not too late, but it's
I understand.
already
Yeah.
caused a fair
Yeah.
amount of damage,
Yeah.
right? So that's the story we've been told so much, that you can't achieve success unless you just keep hustling every day. Now, you're also suggesting that once in a while, it's okay to, of course, you're suggesting it from a routine standpoint on what to do to keep yourself mentally and physically fit. But When we bring it back to the work context also, what are your thoughts on the whole hustle culture, and to what extent should you actually push it? And are you spending enough time to read what it's doing to you?
I think I'm different perspectives on it. Actually, this is itself, I think, like a 1 hour conversation or a day or a year long conversation. I don't know. But the basic thing that we all have to remember is you said something about success. And I think what is success for you? And be aware that your definition of success will also change as you go along in life. What looks like success today will be very different because we are human and we are always looking for the next drug to run after, to chase. A lot of times we feel tired or we feel burnt out because we are like, hey, we've been told these are the 50 things to run after. And so we're just running, and so we feel bad at the end of it because it's like, what is burnout? When you are so-called meeting your successes and you're getting the highs, you're never burnt out. You always feel very empowered and you are like, I'm ready to take on something new, right? Burnout happens because what you are hoping somewhere inside, like your expectation of what you would be doing or what you are or what you can do, what success you will be at, is probably not matching with where you are in reality, right? A lot of burnout is because of that and contributed by looking around you, looking at people around you, and hearing like tons of news about every successful person. But I think the question that you should ask yourself, and I don't think that is an answer that everybody will have when they are 22. That's something that takes time. But what is success? And if you can define that for yourself and continue to re-anchor it every 5 years, reassess it. That's very important because what you might think as success today might not be anything remotely success for you 5 years later. But when you look back, you'll realize that, hey, T minus five of me actually thought that is success. And so today I'm burning out and freaking out because I'm thinking I'm not that, but actually for that, or the T minus 10, like 10 years back, that person would say what I am today is.
Yep.
Reassess and define success for yourself before anything else. That's a hard thing to do, but it's again same as the routine part, continuous. And we all are learning. I think we'll all just continue to figure it out. There's no cookie cutter answer to that.
Yep, spot on. So tell me a little bit about what kind of support system you have. You told a little bit about your family already being there in Canada, and you had some ties there, and that helped you a lot. But
Mm.
outside of just the geographic sort of uprooting and where you're trying to move to a new place, founders, I always advise, should also have a sort of a small network of people that they can count on for difficult days, right? When difficult days, just so that there's somebody to talk. Have you had the chance to have some sort of support ecosystem that way? And what's your advice for other founders?
I'm usually a very outgoing person, so no matter what geography that I am at, I make friends and connections. Rather, I would say friends is a very baby version of that word, but like connections, right? Like deeper connections with people which are fundamentally very mutual. So I have been blessed with that. So I have the ability to do that. And I think a lot of it is purely because I'm very genuine. When I am in a whatever kind of relationship with a person on the other side, it's very genuine and it's very give and take. It's always very balanced, right? Now, even in spite of that, I would say the best support system that I have found is actually my routines and taking care of my own mental health. I think that is the best support system because if you don't have that, you can have seven very strong individuals in your life who are always there to look after you, but you yourself are dissing yourself. And that doesn't help, right? So, first, you have to find your best support in yourself. You have to be your best friend. That is the number one investment you should do is in yourself. Do you love yourself? That's not there. You're just putting, I think, more duress on your relationships. You're making their life difficult. So I think the first thing to do is work on yourself. And then, of course, having people also realizing that every person in your life can only give you a certain part of all the thousands of different colors that make your life whole. So don't expect everything from one or two people. Sometimes some friendships are just over purely books. Some friendships could be just over, hey, we make podcast and we just talk about it. So have you have so many colors that make you. And so you have to remember that there are different people at different levels of that spectrum who will add to your life, right? But you are the number one. You are your best friend. And if you can't support yourself, then others really will be failing.
I think that's a brilliant answer. And you could have, like you said, the best people around the world being close to you, ready to take care of you. But if you can't take care of yourself, and if you can't understand yourself, there's only so much that others can do for you. So, spot on. We'll switch gears a little bit. One thing that you've done really well, or you've at least had multiple experiences, is setting up GTM teams in different parts of the world. You told a little bit about North America, GCC, Southeast Asia. Can you share a little bit of your learnings and tips on how to approach this problem? I recently actually wrote a piece on LinkedIn. I have a lot of founders who come to me and ask, hey, do you know a good salesperson or a marketing leader in North America that we could hire? And more often than not, I understand that they've never really even tested the waters out in the market in North America. They've achieved success in their local market, which is great. Few people even achieve that. But more often than not, I advise people that you have to achieve that product market fit in other markets as well before you go hire people. And it's not really always, okay, I'm going to hire people and that's going to solve the problem. It's not. You've done this a few times in different parts of the world. What's your learning and experience been on when do you go hire more people in the GTM side? And what's some best practices to do that?
There are two parts to that answer. Part one is that if you are a new founder or someone who's a little younger in your career, right? At that point, a lot of your energy and ability to experiment very fast and all of those are working for you, right? So what you should hence do is really go out there, crack that region or function. That's your number one job because you can, right? And that's your advantage. Your advantage is not hiring. Your advantage is not your wealth of experience to bank on, right? Your advantage is your ability to execute the hell out of anybody else around you. So leverage that and definitely try and do a lot of things like the person that I was talking about. He's doing a lot of things. He's a very young founder, right? So go and crack that market in some form. It need not be I need 1 million out of that region. No, not necessarily, but whatever are the signals. Do you have a message that resonates with the target persona? Do you even know who's the target persona? Is it different from your base region to that region? First. Second, do you have a message that resonates, a problem statement, a pain point that resonates with that person? And now, are they willing to pay for it? And then are you able to repeat that across a certain quantity or volume of repetitions, right? Are you able to rinse and repeat essentially? So if that works, then yeah, you should definitely now hire and set up your team and all of that, right? Now, if you're an experienced founder, I would say that what your advantage is your ability to spot skills, right? So that actually shifts quite dramatically as you gain experience. You start seeing a lot of patterns and you also see a lot of things that haven't worked. And some things that you see are when things work, you're starting to see now patterns out of things that are working, right? So your wealth or your USP is that you have this bank, a data bank, whether it's intuitive or it's like real frameworks, it depends, but you have something. You have intuition plus a framework or set of frameworks. So for you, it's about, can I understand now or hypothesize, essentially, understanding the market, what would be the best first steps to achieve that? Right? For example, in retail, we know by experience that retail works a lot on partnerships first, right? At least a mass of retail works in that way. It's a very complex ecosystem. People don't have all the answers, so they prefer to work with partners, technology partners also, to understand what should they do next, right? Or marketing partners and so on. Now, within that, if you turn the lens on to, let's say, Southeast Asia, very unlike India, they are not very tech savvy. They are a little afraid, hands off. And you going in as a technology solution might not, like nobody might even know what do I use technology for. So your hypothesis hence goes to that being a service provider or something of that sort might be a better go-to-market. So as I said, as you grow older, to illustrate that, your ability is to understand all these patterns and rely on your experience. So then you might be able to actually say that my best first win is actually understanding this best GTM strategy for day 0 or day 1, and then probably getting someone who's the closest to executing that strategy. Could be yourself, could be someone in your team, or it could be someone that knew that partner with or contract or maybe hire, right? Preferably contract, but and then figure out hire. So that is how I would think about it. Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's a great answer and definitely food for thought for a lot of people who are in that zone and trying to figure out how to make that decision. You also run a podcast, I believe it's called Shelf. Can you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit more about it?
Yeah. Again, it's born out of just loving to talk to people. I love talking to people. And I think someone said that, why don't you start recording because the conversation sounds fun? To be very honest, none of the episodes so far have done justice to the fun I have when I meet people and talk to them. So I'm thinking maybe I should actually take it on the road. And so Shelf on the road is something that I'm seriously contemplating. I
Yeah.
travel a lot, as you kind of are aware. I'm thinking that's probably the next phase of what I should do. Maybe the podcast format. Just plain video recording might not be the best for me. But I love meeting people. As I said, when I get into a new place, I always leave the place with at least one or two people whom I have forged a great connection with whom I'm in touch for years beyond, and who just happen to be my friend. Oh, my friend who lives in Kyrgyzstan. So there's always people all over the world who I am always in touch with. My team was saying that you keep meeting all these different, awesome, interesting folks in commerce and record some of the learnings for us, because otherwise we miss out on that understanding of commerce in a way, because commerce is so deep. So it started out more with just getting people to talk to our team. That's how it started last year. So we used to invite people and our team used to join, and they would just ask questions, and then they would learn a little bit about branding or marketing, or how do I bundle better? What are the pricing strategies I can use? How can I think about running sales during peak season or off season? Literally. And then we said that, okay, let's convert it into webinars. So we did that. Then we moved to live streams. And then we said that, no, let's actually make it a podcast. So that's what I've been doing in this year, is recording it as a podcast. But as I said, I have a feeling that it's going to be more like I went out for a coffee. So it's more comedians and car having coffee. I think that's what it's going to move to. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. That'd be fun, actually. I miss
Fun.
that a lot as well because pre-COVID, of course, we used to go to a lot of events, and now that's starting to come back again. And I get a chance to meet a lot of people for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wait to plan every episode that I want to record, and it would be a lot of fun to pull up your phone, have some recording, because a lot of times very interesting conversations happen just serendipitously, right? And
That
it
is
just
very true. Yeah.
yeah, you could schedule as many conversations as you want. A lot of times, very insightful observations come out when you're least expecting it.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, hopefully, good luck if you do start that. I would be definitely excited to watch. As we get closer to the end of the show, right? The audience of this podcast likes to understand more about how they are going to try to move, what geography is going to work for them. Of course, they want to be closer to the market because you are serving primarily the North American market. Of course, you're exploring new markets as well. And because you're based in Canada, can you give one or maybe multiple reasons why somebody should be in Canada?
Yeah. Again, no cookie cutter reason why you should be based out of Canada. But one big thing is that there's a lot of great talent, and it looks like a lot of them are looking for good jobs as a reality in Canada today. So you can definitely get a lot of great talent, and there's so many Indians. If you have not ever worked in an MNC or a multi-region company, if you are not sure how to really manage global teams from day one, it's a great segue because you're managing Indians in Canada. It's a good starting point, right? It's just so much great talent there who just move because they feel Canada is a better place for their family, for their future. But maybe the job they're doing is not as challenging, and they're really looking for an opportunity to grow super fast. So that is a big yes in Canada, I think. Like there are just tons of people moving from US off to Canada because of all the whole visa and all the immigration policies in US, or who are moving from India to Canada, or not just from India, but also a lot of like Asia and now Middle Eastern move to Canada. So
Yep.
number one is because of the kind of talent you'll get, right? Number two is that AI, if you are, and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about leveraging AI, it's just one of the Toronto University, if you look back and you dig back into the origins of AI. In fact, even OpenAI is one of the founders. He studied in Toronto too, right? Not everybody knows about it, but it's a big AI hub. So you will get great PhDs. You can talk to them. If you're using applied AIs, you'll learn a lot about AI from folks like that and be able to use them ahead of time or even think of how to leverage. If you are building fundamental LLMs and whatnot, then I think like you should definitely be collaborating with such PhDs from day one, and who knows where your story moves, right? So that's number two, that not a lot of people are thinking from that perspective. And I think three is proximity to overall North America. And it's also not very far away from Europe, right? So it's not a bad place where you can centrally locate yourself for that whole region, because US is just pretty much just across the board, to be very honest. It's easier to go if you want to expand into South America, which is a huge opportunity. It's not like flying all the way from India. It is definitely much easier to expand. Europe is not very far. If you're in French Canada, then you already have applied nativity in France. So a lot of people that you work can give you inroads into Europe. A lot of immigrants from Europe too. So I think from that perspective of being a nice centrally located, which is not going to kill your budgets, because if you are a startup, you definitely want to be conscious of that. But also in terms of the location where you can fly in and around and expand out fairly quickly into a very lucrative upcoming region or one of the traditional old regions of Europe. So yeah, these are, I would say, three reasons why.
Awesome.
I think for folks who are growing your family and all of that, it gives you everything that North America gives you, United States of America, but I think at least at the moment still far more safer and more accommodating society and all of that. So I think just in terms of safety and peace of mind, it's definitely a better place for people with kids.
Yeah, that sounds good, Cause. Thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences and amazing observations and insights. I'm sure our listeners will find this very helpful. Thanks again for taking time to join us on the show. It was a pleasure talking to you and learning so much from you. And we'll go ahead and share your social credentials with our audience here so that they can connect with you and continue to stay in touch and learn more from you.
Feel free. I'm always up for a chat and a coffee, as you might already have guessed by the end of this. If you have stayed till now, till the end of this episode, you'll know that I'm always up for a coffee. So please hit me up. And Pratik, lovely meeting you. The next
Okay.
time we are grabbing a coffee.
Sounds good, Cause. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that wraps up today's episode. Before we sign off, I would like to thank you for your support and thanks for tuning in. If you loved today's episode, then don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Be kind, be happy, challenge the norm. I'll see you folks again for the next one.